not gonna leave me like Jimmy Butler, right? Right? All right, go ahead, get out of here. I'm done with you. It's not even my cat. Anyways, it's been a few days since we've talked about the Jimmy Butler saga, but I wanted to come on here today and make a video because Jake Fischer released a very interesting article that kind of has all of Heat Twitter blowing up. I did sit down and read the entire article because y'all know one of my biggest gripes with society today is people just read headlines and share their opinions, and a lot of times that's how misinformation gets spread. But I actually read the whole article and I kind of want to get into some of the interesting portions of that. So to start off the article, and to Jake's credit, he does acknowledge that the main reason for all of these issues and the feud between Jimmy and the Heat is centered around money. Of course, Jimmy Butler wants his max extension and the Heat are unwilling to give that to him. And that has become more clear to me over the last couple of days because a couple weeks ago, there was a few reasons that we thought might be the cause of all of this. Of course, there was Pat Riley's comments in the offseason where he told Jimmy to keep his mouth shut. Of course, there was Jimmy Butler wanting more help on this current roster so they could be a true contender. And of course, there was the money issue. But a couple of days ago, there was reports of Jimmy's camp basically telling Memphis and Milwaukee to not trade for Jimmy Butler. And both of those teams, I feel safe saying, are championship contenders. So if Jimmy's camp is telling those teams to not trade for him, then that tells me that it's clear as day Jimmy just wants to get paid, which is why he wants to go to the Phoenix Suns, which are owned by a crazy guy named Matt Ishbia, who's just willing to shell out all kinds of ridiculous contracts. But I have more context and information on that in my last Jimmy Butler video. But further along in the article, to try to provide some context on how this relationship soured.
Jimmy Butler versus Pat Riley begins.
God damn it, the Godfather and the got me started. Jake actually points out a specific experience he remembers of Jimmy Butler leaving a shoot-around early. He says, I remember visiting Miami's morning shoot-around in Oklahoma City back in December of 2022. Butler walked out prematurely with Kyle Lowry in lockstep. Mind you, this was before Butler's injuries and intermittent availability, according to league sources, became a source of tangible tension within the organization. Now, the reason this part was sort of interesting to me is because if you've been a Heat fan and you've been following the team for the last several years, it's been kind of widely reported that Jimmy has gotten special privileges that other stars like LeBron hasn't gotten. It has been reported that Jimmy has stayed in separate hotel rooms at times. It's been reported that he's taken private flights aside from the team chartered planes. Now, how much of that is true? I don't exactly know. Now, Jake here does give a personal account of him seeing Jimmy leave a practice early, but I don't really think this part of the article was as big of a bombshell as people are making it out to be, because I think most of this stuff was known, and I don't really want to share my opinion on all that because for all we know, there could be extenuating circumstances or reasons for Jimmy Butler needing to be separate at times. I don't know what those reasons are. You know, they could be personal reasons. All I do know is the chemistry that I've seen with his teammates on the court, the things that he said about the teammates and the coaching staff and the front office. And other than this season, obviously, they've been generally positive. We had the phrase power of friendship and tomfoolery for a reason, and those included Jimmy Butler. So if he has been on separate planes and hotels for the last several seasons, I don't necessarily think that affected the chemistry directly because we saw this team have a lot of great moments of friendship throughout the years. But the next paragraph in this article is actually very interesting to me because Jake says, sources say even Lowry, who remains close away from the court as anyone to Butler, gradually grew fatigued by his teammates' headstrong tendencies. So Jake is basically saying that even Kyle Lowry got annoyed with Jimmy Butler, which I found to be very interesting because it seems like it might be one of those circumstances where you ever heard the phrase, don't move in with your friends? Because you can be best friends with someone, and when you're at a young age, you know, maybe in your early 20s, it sounds all fun. Oh, hey, let's get an apartment together. Let's move in together. But as soon as you're living with that person full time or you're around them every day, that's when you start to hate each other. And that seems like that might have been what happened between Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler. Now, whose fault is that? I would say it's Jimmy Butler's because it's also very clear that he wanted his best friend Lowry on the team. The Heat went out there and got Kyle Lowry. If it doesn't work out, that's not the front office's fault. Now, of course, just to reiterate my stance on all of this, I do think the front office deserves majority of the blame for letting this situation to get to where it's at, because if they would have got Jimmy Butler some other help outside of Kyle Lowry, we probably never would have been in this situation. But that's a whole other topic that I've gotten into 100 times. But it's just interesting to hear how the one guy the Heat actually were able to get ended up sort of having a negative effect on Jimmy Butler's relationship with the Heat. And his friendship with Lowry always kind of confused me because, and again, it's a very strong relationship. It's more like a brotherhood because, I mean, Kyle Lowry is literally the godfather of Jimmy Butler's daughter. So they're tight. They're not just close friends. They're more than that. But just from a completely, and I'm acknowledging, obviously, completely ignorant outside perspective, that dynamic never made a lot of sense to me. Because obviously Kyle Lowry's been sort of known as a guy who's not usually in the best shape. And, you know, same with Joel Embiid and a lot of those guys I've seen take plays off on defense. And that really is not Jimmy Butler's MO. He's always been known as the hardest working. I'll bust your ass. I'm up at 2 a.m. working to make sure my body's in pristine condition. Like, that's always been Jimmy Butler. And I kind of look at Kyle Lowry and Joel Embiid as like the complete opposite of that, which is why it always confused me why Jimmy was so close with those two guys in particular, because we know Jimmy has left other spots because he hasn't liked teammates because they don't work as hard as him. And again, I'm just assuming here, but I think it's safe to say that Kyle Lowry in particular didn't necessarily have the same work ethic as Jimmy Butler. And we have heard a little bit of that because Kyle Lowry's exit from the Heat wasn't necessarily pretty either. There did seem to be a lot of turmoil between him and the coaching staff. And I know Lowry is one of the few guys that the Heat sort of softened up their body fat test on during the years because the Heat used to be strict on that. Obviously, there's all kind of stories of Shaq not passing the body fat test and Shaq and Riley getting into it. But then even more recently, I think James Johnson got suspended in one season, obviously back in 2017 or whatever, because he didn't pass the body fat test. But over the years, it seemed like the Heat has sort of softened up on that. And some of that was for Kyle Lowry. And that has been reported stuff. That is not me speculating. But now let's move along in the article to what I would say is really the main part that has Heat Twitter up in a tizzy. Although, like I said earlier, none of this is that surprising because it has been reported in the past. But Jake Fischer says that among Butler's transgressions, according to league sources, have been multiple instances of Butler skipping out on morning shoot-arounds altogether and insisting on private flights separate from Miami's team charter. And then Jake Fischer also goes on to mention that Tim Hardaway, of course, which this happened over the last couple of days. Tim Hardaway, Miami Heat legend, maybe the greatest point guard in Heat history, went on Sirius XM NBA radio, so the official radio station of the league. Tim Hardaway went on that show and said that Riley sent a 10-page letter to the Players Association detailing Butler's missteps. This whole thing with Tim Hardaway in particular was interesting because, of course, the NBA Players Association filed a grievance against the Miami Heat for suspending Jimmy Butler 7 games. But the Heat said, we're prepared for that. We got this 10-page document that we're going to send to you basically detailing all of this stuff. Now, I did listen to the 5 Reasons Sports podcast talking about this, and they brought up a very interesting point, saying that coming from Tim Hardaway, that makes this even more interesting. Of course, the messenger in this is not a guy that we typically associate as the Heat culture guy. When you think Heat culture guys still with the organization, you think of Zoe, you think Udonis. That's not necessarily Tim Hardaway. And as they pointed out on the 5 Reasons podcast, Tim Hardaway is a guy that had contract disputes with Pat Riley in the front office. So he's literally been in the same situation as Jimmy Butler. And for him to be appearing to take the front office's side on this, it does make it seem like maybe there's a lot of things going on in the wrong on Jimmy Butler's end. But to Jimmy's credit, if the Heat have been allowing him to stay separate from the team on flights and hotels the last several seasons, how are they going to come back at him now and say, oh, we're suspending you because of that, when they also enabled it for the last several seasons? So there's still a lot of confusion up in the air, but that's kind of where we stand as of right now. Now, in the next paragraph, Jake kind of speculates some other reasons why Jimmy might be upset. And I honestly think that the rest of the article is just terrible and way off base, because he goes on to say, maybe the strongest argument Butler could muster as a counter is look to his left and right, and his closest teammates from the Cinderella team in 2023 are gone. At a time when the 33-5 Cavaliers serve as quite the poster team for the benefits of roster continuity, Butler's formerly finals-worthy supporting cast has witnessed a flurry of departures reminiscent of the mile-high exits of Bruce Brown and Contavious Caldwell-Pope and whatever. So basically what Jake is trying to say is that Jimmy could be frustrated that Max Strus is gone and Gabe Vincent's gone and Caleb Martin's gone. And the reason I think that's ridiculous is because you can't say that you were unhappy with the help that the Heat got you, but then also mad that those same guys that you weren't happy with are leaving. And then to bring up the Cleveland Cavaliers as a counterpoint to that is ridiculous as well, because the Cavs aren't 33-5 because of their continuity. They have the best record in the East because they got a star backcourt and two dominant 7-footers in their front court. That's why. That team doesn't have many holes when it comes to roster construction. Whereas the Miami Heat, they have a ton of holes. For example, they haven't been a good rebounding team in 6 years. They've been a small team for 6 years, and they've yet to fix that. So if Jimmy Butler wants to be mad that the team hasn't really got him any superstar help or went to fill all these holes that they've known they've had, fine. But to say he's mad over losing Gabe and Strus and Caleb, that just doesn't make any sense to me. And again, this isn't Jimmy saying this. This is Jake Fischer speculating this. And to me, that just doesn't make a lot of sense. But Jake does elaborate this point in the next couple of paragraphs, in which he has a couple of quotes from some league sources. One league source says, a lot of reason for the success of the Miami Heat was the chemistry they had. Another league source says those were Butler's guys. And again, this is stupid to me. Just because they lost Max, Gabe, and Caleb doesn't mean they don't have chemistry. This Heat core is Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. That core has been together for 6 seasons. There's a reason the term run it back exists. So to say that this Heat team no longer has chemistry is ridiculous. And of course, I very much understand Jimmy's relationship with Max Strus. The article later goes on to say that Butler is said to have viewed Strus as a brother, someone who can match the All-Star's sarcastic sense of humor. They hatched the celebrated handshake routine and blah, blah, blah. We know the friendship between Jimmy Butler and Max Strus. They used to flick each other off every time they used to go to dap each other up. It was an awesome friendship. And if y'all been friends of the channel, y'all know I love my boy Max Strus. But to act like Jimmy now wants out and hates the Miami Heat front office because they let Strus go, that's stupid. That doesn't make any sense. Like, have y'all seen Jimmy Butler's relationship with Nikola Jovic? Jimmy literally went to the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin to watch Nikola Jovic play a G League game. That's his boy. So to act like Jimmy has no other friends on the team and we haven't seen really awesome moments between him and Tyler and him and Bam over the years and him and Jaime Jaquez shooting commercials, like to act like he has no other friends on the team, that's just ridiculous. And to act like and to use this sort of not paying Gabe and Caleb and Strus again, to use it as a scapegoat, that's stupid to me. That doesn't make any sense. Now, if you want to turn that into a bigger overall point, and saying that the Heat have problems of being cheap, quite frankly, and being unwilling to pay the luxury tax, that's fair. Because you can't win a championship unless you go deep into the luxury tax. That's just the reality of the situation. When you look at a team like the Boston Celtics, who are deep into the second apron, but guess what? They got a ring. And we've always heard over the years, even back to the Big Three era, that Mickey Arison doesn't like to spend into the tax unless they have a championship team. We've heard that he's willing to spend the tax if they believe they have a championship team. But you're telling me that a team that went to the NBA Finals the first year of this build in 2020, that's not a championship team? Because that's what I'm hearing. Because they've been unwilling to go deep into the tax in any year that Jimmy Butler's been here. They've been unwilling to make any major moves that would put some hard implications on them and have them have a heavy luxury tax fine. That's just the reality of the situation. Because we've talked about this before. In Jimmy Butler's 6 years here, the best players they've gotten is Kyle Lowry. We've talked about that. But then it's like Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, Caleb Martin, all undrafted players who are getting paid no money. And then who else? A cheap Oladipo because of the injuries. A Jay Crowder, who wasn't even the main part of that trade. They were trying to get Iguodala. Like, they never really spent big money to get Jimmy Butler help. And I think that's the real problem. is that they very clearly had a core that was capable of going on a championship run and did not make the moves necessary to get it done. Because I'm sure Jimmy Butler was mad Strus was gone, or not mad, but disappointed, sad to see his friend go, fine. But if they would have got back Damian Lillard in return, which is who they should have got, you think Jimmy would be mad that Strus is gone? No, not at all. But now Jimmy's sitting here saying, oh, well, you got rid of my friends. You didn't get Damian Lillard. You didn't give me any other help. And now you're not going to pay me? Well, that's why he's frustrated. And I think that's why we stand where we are today. It was interesting to read later in the article as well. Jake Fischer actually interviewed Caleb Martin about the whole situation. And here's what Caleb had to say. He said, I think it's part of the growth with Bam, growth with Tyler, and everybody stepping into bigger roles and trying to figure out how to make everything mesh at once. It's hard, man. There's only one basketball. Sometimes it's really tough. You got a lot of alphas out there who are trying to step into their own, and obviously Jimmy is Jimmy. The part about this that's interesting to me is just the line Jimmy is Jimmy, because whenever you hear something like that, for example, two of the phrases that I hate the most is boys will be boys, kids will be kids, because all that line, all that phrase does is excuse bad behavior, in my opinion. How many times you seen boys do something completely inappropriate and you heard their terrible parents go out there and say, oh, well, boys will be boys? No, that's BS, bro. Like, that's just BS. You can't use that phrase to excuse inexcusable behavior. And just for Caleb to come out here and say Jimmy's Jimmy, it's kind of his way of saying, hey, Jimmy's a lot, man. I could see what kind of led to that. But anyways, what happens now? I don't know, but it'll be interesting. I mean, for the last several seasons, it's kind of been boring watching Heat basketball at times, but now we got something to look forward to, because the reports have been that Jimmy Butler is returning to the Miami Heat on January 19th when they play the Nuggets. And of course, y'all probably heard I'm excited because I'm going to the next game when they play the Spurs. So I'm hoping I at least get to see Jimmy Butler one more time, because he's certainly a joy to watch. I'm very curious to see if he plays. I think how well the team has been playing now does impact that, because I also will say I've very much enjoyed watching this team, more so recently than I have in a long time. And that's because the young guys are playing so well. Like, I'm literally enjoying staying up till 1 a.m. watching these young guys, because they've been hooping, bro. Shout out Jaime Jaquez, shout out Nikola Jovic, Tyler Hero, all-star. Go vote for him. And obviously Bam Adebayo has been better of late, although we still want to see some more consistency there. But I do think that impacts what we see going forward. I was just on a space, hosted by my guy, Royal A. Shepard, and I said I don't necessarily expect Jimmy Butler to start. I would want him to start, but I just don't think we necessarily see that, because Jimmy kind of called out Spoelstra in the last press conference we heard him do. Jimmy said he wasn't happy with his role. So now Spoelstra is probably offended at that he was called out publicly for no reason. And then on top of that, the young guys are balling. Like, how can you take both of those things and just assume Jimmy Butler's going to slide right back in and start? Because not only do you got to worry about Jimmy trying out there, I guess, because you're trying to stack up these wins right now, and this young core has been able to do it, but you also got to worry about Jimmy Butler messing up the chemistry. Let's not act like the chemistry on this team hasn't been awesome since Jimmy Butler left. So for even for this Jake Fischer article to come out and say, oh, Jimmy is not happy now because his best friend Strus is gone, acting like the locker room is a giant mess, that's just not true. I mean, this team has still been having a lot of fun. It looks like they're having more fun recently with the Jimmy Butler suspension than they had with him here. And a lot of times, the mood of your team follows what your leader is feeling. So if the vibes with Jimmy weren't great, that can kind of trickle down to the rest of the team. But now with Jimmy gone, you're seeing the whole bench stand for nearly the entire game, celebrating each other's successes, to have one of the oldest Spoisms, right? You're seeing Khalil wear dunk. The bench is going crazy. You're seeing Kevin Love, who said that he can still contribute to this team. He's not getting any minutes, but he's not sitting on the bench pouting. He's thrilled to see a guy like Ashad Johnson go out there and get some run. They're just very happy watching each other play basketball, and it's led to wins recently. So, and it does seem like some of the players are also starting to get tired of Jimmy Butler. On top of that, you had some Haywood Highsmith quotes after the Portland game, in which he just said, we're winning with the guys that are here. You had Tyler Hero after the game just saying the chemistry is really great right now. And while I don't think these players are intentionally taking subtle shots at Jimmy Butler, I do think that they're making it a point to say how happy they are now. And you can see that based off the bench reactions. You can hear it on the quotes. And most importantly, it's been transferring to wins as the Heat sit 3 games above 500 and only a half a game back of 4th place in the Eastern Conference. But anyways, that's kind of where we stand right now with the Jimmy Butler situation. Let me know y'all thoughts down below, because I'm very curious to hear what everyone thinks, especially since I kind of rambled a lot this video. I don't really know if it makes any chronological sense, but the news is breaking so fast. There's so much coming out, and I just wanted to sit in front of the camera and talk about it a little bit and hear y'all thoughts as well. So in addition to commenting, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm on the grind to 7K subs, which is dope. And I'll see y'all with a post game tonight. The Heat play the Clippers at 10:30 p.m. And I will be staying up, so y'all will get a very, very late or early post game today, depending on how y'all look at it. Unless the Heat are down like 20 at halftime. No promises then, but we'll see what happens. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Peace out.
Look, pull up in your city, tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.